Imagine lying in bed at night, drifting off to sleep, your room quiet, the world outside hushed. You feel safe, because your bedroom, that one sacred space, is where nothing bad is supposed to happen. But for some people, the nightmare begins the moment they close their eyes. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about 3 stories where what happened in the middle of the night didn't just wake people up, it changed, and in some cases, ended their lives. These are true crime sleep stories that will haunt you. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed because I always bring you the darkest, most chilling true crime stories that the world has almost forgotten. Story 1, The Footsteps at the Door. It was a cold October night in 1996 in a small Ohio town. A 17-year-old girl named Rachel had just gotten home from her shift at a local diner. She lived with her parents in a modest 2-story house on the edge of town. Her parents were already asleep by the time she returned, so she quietly crept upstairs, slipped into her pajamas, and climbed into bed. Nothing unusual. Just another night. But around 2:15 a.m., Rachel was startled awake by a faint sound outside her bedroom door, footsteps. At first, she thought it was her dad, maybe coming to check on her, but something about the sound was off. Too slow. Too deliberate. She froze, listening. The footsteps stopped. Then, the handle of her door began to turn. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest. She whispered, "Dad?" But no one answered. The handle jiggled again, then went still. She pulled the covers over her head and told herself she was imagining things. But minutes later, she heard it again, the sound of someone standing just outside her door. Breathing. Terrified, she forced herself to stay awake until dawn. When morning came, she bolted downstairs, pale and shaken, and asked her parents if they had come to her room during the night. They swore they hadn't. Later that day, a horrifying discovery was made in the neighborhood. A house just 2 blocks away had been broken into. A woman inside was brutally attacked in her sleep. And the worst part? Police believe the intruder had tried multiple houses first before finding one with an unlocked door. Rachel never slept with her bedroom door unlocked again. Suspense build, the pattern. What makes this story so chilling is that it wasn't isolated. In the 1990s, towns across the Midwest were plagued by a string of bedroom intrusions, cases where people were stalked while sleeping, their homes broken into in the dead of night. Victims described waking up to find a stranger standing silently in the corner of their rooms. Some survived. Others didn't. The FBI even gave these types of criminals a nickname, the Night Walkers. They operated under one terrifying rule: they never attacked when people were awake. Only when they were sleeping. This brings us to our next case, which escalates that fear to a whole new level. If this already has you checking your bedroom door, hit that like button. It helps push these stories out to more people who need to hear them. Story 2, The Locked Window. In the summer of 2008, a 29-year-old woman named Claire lived alone in an apartment complex in Phoenix, Arizona. She worked late nights as a nurse, so her schedule was irregular. Most nights, she came home, locked her doors, and went to bed immediately. But one night, as she lay in bed scrolling through her phone, she noticed something strange. Her bedroom window, which she always kept locked, looked slightly open. Not much. Just a crack. At first, she thought she had forgotten to lock it. But when she stood up to close it, she saw something outside in the shadows of the courtyard, a man, standing perfectly still, staring directly into her room. Claire froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Then, without breaking eye contact, the man slowly backed into the darkness. The next morning, she found dirt smudges on her windowsill, like someone had been trying to pry it open. Shaken, she immediately called her landlord and asked if the building had cameras. There were none. 2 weeks later, another woman in the complex was found dead in her bed. Cause of death, strangulation. No forced entry. Police concluded the killer had entered through her bedroom window. To this day, Claire is convinced the man staring at her was the same intruder, and that night, she had been just seconds away from being his next victim. Heightened intrigue, the psychology. Psychologists who study these crimes describe a chilling element, the obsession with vulnerability. Bedrooms are supposed to be safe zones, the place where our guard is down. Intruders who attack while people sleep aren't just committing violence, they're desecrating the one place we trust the most. And in many cases, these killers watch first. They stand silently in the dark, waiting, making the victim's own home feel like a trap. Which brings us to the most disturbing case of all. If you're new here, don't just watch, join us. Subscribe right now because what's coming next is darker than anything we've covered so far. Story 3. The Stranger in the Closet. In 2011, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a college student named James began hearing odd noises in his apartment at night. Scratches, creaks, even the sound of faint breathing. He told his friends he thought the place was haunted. But one night, James woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of his closet door sliding open. Half asleep, he thought it was just settling wood, until he looked up and saw a man crouching inside the closet, staring at him. James leapt out of bed, bolted for the door, and ran screaming into the hallway. Police arrived minutes later and discovered the man still inside the closet, clutching a kitchen knife. He had broken in earlier that day, hid inside, and waited. His plan was to attack James in his sleep. When police questioned him, he admitted something chilling. James wasn't the first. He had done this before. 3 stories. 3 bedrooms. 3 people who learned the hard way that sleep doesn't always mean safety. But these are just the beginning. Because in Act 2, we're going to look at a case where the killer didn't just enter at night, he made sure his victims never woke up at all. The night killer. Most killers strike when their victims are awake, when there's resistance, panic, chaos. But what if the killer's goal is to make sure you never wake up at all? In this act, I'm going to take you through a story so unsettling that even seasoned detectives admitted it haunted them at night. It's the case of a man who used the cover of darkness not just to sneak into people's homes, but to silently erase entire families while they slept. Story 4. The Silent Visitor. In 1984, in the quiet suburb of Irvine, California, a young couple, Keith and Patty Harrington, were newlyweds. They lived in a nice 2-story home on a cul-de-sac. Neighbors described them as happy, deeply in love, and just starting their lives together. On the morning of August 20th, their family couldn't reach them. Calls went unanswered. Eventually, Patty's brother drove to the house. He knocked. No answer. He walked around back, noticing the sliding glass door slightly ajar. When he stepped inside, the scene was silent. Too silent. He walked upstairs, and froze. Keith and Patty were in their bed. Both murdered. No forced entry. No sign of a struggle. It looked almost like they had never woken up. The investigation would later reveal something terrifying. The killer had slipped in during the night, crept upstairs, and attacked them while they slept side by side. They never had a chance to fight back. At the time, the crime went unsolved. But years later, DNA evidence connected the murders to a serial predator, the Golden State Killer. This was his signature. He didn't just break into homes. He invaded people's bedrooms, robbed them of safety, and made sure their last moments were in the one place they felt most secure. Suspense builds, the pattern emerges. The Harrington case wasn't isolated. Throughout California in the late 1970s and 80s, families reported eerie disturbances, sliding doors found open, window screens removed, pets acting strangely at night. For months, nothing happened. Then suddenly, neighbors would discover that the family next door had been brutally murdered in their beds. One detective put it this way. He wasn't breaking into houses. He was breaking into their lives, their sleep, their peace. This wasn't just burglary. It was psychological warfare. If you're still here, that tells me you love these kinds of disturbing cases. Do me a favor, tap subscribe right now. That way, you never miss these hidden, haunting stories. Story 5, The Wichita Nightmare. Fast forward to Kansas, 2000. A group of 5 college friends, 2 men and 3 women, were having a quiet night in at one of their homes. They cooked dinner, watched TV, and eventually fell asleep in the living room. At around 11:30 p.m., the door suddenly burst open. A masked man entered with a gun. He ordered everyone to the floor. This wasn't random. The man had been watching them, stalking them, waiting for the right night. Over the next several hours, he forced the group through a series of humiliations, binding them, threatening them, moving them from room to room. What makes this case horrifying isn't just the violence, it's the way he exploited the fact that they were caught in a place where they should have been safest. By dawn, only one of the friends survived. Her testimony later revealed the killer's chilling precision. He planned it for weeks. He had watched them through their windows while they slept, memorized their routines, and struck at the moment he knew they were most vulnerable. This case would later be known as the Wichita Massacre, and it remains one of the most infamous home invasion murders in American history. Psychological undercurrent: why bedrooms? Criminologists who studied both the Golden State Killer and the Wichita case pointed out something striking: the obsession with control. A killer who strikes people while they sleep isn't just after violence. They want dominion over vulnerability itself. It's a twisted psychology, removing choice, resistance, even consciousness from the victim. And as unsettling as these crimes are, the most chilling part is this: many of these killers remain fascinated by the exact moment between sleep and wakefulness. That razor's edge when the victim has no idea what's about to happen. We've now seen killers who slip into bedrooms undetected, couples murdered in their own beds, and groups terrorized after falling asleep in what they thought was safety. But what happens when the danger doesn't just strike once, but returns, night after night, until the entire town can't sleep? That's what Act 3 is about, a case where bedtime itself became a countdown to terror. The town that couldn't sleep. What if going to bed didn't feel like rest, but like rolling dice with death? Imagine lying in the dark, clutching your blanket, knowing that someone, or something, was out there, watching, waiting for you to close your eyes. For one town, this wasn't imagination. It was real. Story 6, The East Coast Watcher. In 2004, a small community outside Richmond, Virginia, began experiencing something strange. Families reported seeing a man late at night walking down their streets, stopping at random houses, and staring into bedroom windows. At first, police thought it was just a peeping Tom. But then the break-ins started. One couple woke to find their back door wide open. Another found muddy footprints in their living room, leading right up to their bedroom door. Nothing stolen. Just silence. And then came the first murder. A 34-year-old woman named Dana was found strangled in her bed. No signs of forced entry. No theft. Just the horrifying realization that someone had been inside her home while she slept, and this time, he hadn't left quietly. The town spiraled into fear. Parents started taking turns staying awake all night. Hardware stores sold out of locks, motion sensors, and floodlights. People stopped sleeping near windows. But none of it mattered. Because no matter how many precautions they took, the intruder always seemed one step ahead. Suspense built, escalation. Within 3 months, there were 4 more murders. Always the same pattern: victims attacked in their sleep, no theft, no ransom, no clear motive. Police began calling him the sleep stalker. Detectives later admitted that they struggled with the psychology of the case. The killer seemed to want nothing but the act itself, breaking into homes, standing silently in the dark, and then taking lives as if extinguishing candles. If this story already has you checking your locks, then you're exactly who I make these videos for. Hit that like button, it helps get these stories in front of more people who love true crime. Story 7, The Family That Fought Back. In January 2005, the sleep stalker made a mistake. He targeted the Jensen family, 2 parents and their teenage son. That night, the father, Peter, had fallen asleep in the living room watching TV. At around 2:40 a.m., he woke to a faint creaking sound upstairs. Peter froze. His wife and son were asleep up there. He grabbed a fireplace poker and quietly climbed the staircase. Halfway up, he saw it, the silhouette of a man standing in the hallway, holding a knife. Peter shouted, charging forward, and the intruder bolted. He crashed through a window and fled into the night. Police searched the woods but found nothing. Still, the encounter gave them their first real lead, a description of the suspect. Tall, lean, dressed in black, and wearing gloves. For weeks after that, the Jensen family couldn't sleep. Neither could the town. Intrigue, why sleep? Criminologists later suggested that the sleep stalker's obsession wasn't about robbery, or even sadism, it was about domination through vulnerability. He wanted to control people in the exact moment when they were powerless. That was why he kept returning. Why he left houses untouched except for the lingering dread. He wanted the fear to spread like wildfire. And it worked. By spring of 2005, nearly every resident of the town admitted they weren't sleeping. People kept lights on all night. Some neighbors even slept in shifts, guarding each other's houses. But the murders didn't stop. The sleep stalker would vanish after 2005, leaving behind at least 7 confirmed murders, dozens of break-ins, and an entire community scarred by insomnia and fear. To this day, his identity remains unknown. But as haunting as this case is, there's another story that makes it even worse, a man who not only entered bedrooms, but left behind something far more terrifying than footprints or silence. He left messages. Messages in the dark. It's one thing to know someone was in your home while you slept. But imagine waking up and finding out they hadn't just been there, they had left you a message. A note. A sentence written in your own house, in your most private space. In this act, we're going to look at the killers who turned sleep into a trap and communication into a weapon. Story 8, The Writing on the Wall. In 1974, in Sacramento, California, a young woman named Carol came home from work late one evening. She went through her usual routine, locked her doors, checked her windows, brushed her teeth, and got into bed. The next morning, she woke up to find something strange. On her bathroom mirror, written in lipstick, were the words, "I'm watching you sleep." Carol screamed and bolted out of the house. Police arrived and searched, but there was no sign of forced entry, no fingerprints, no evidence of a break-in. For weeks, Carol stayed with friends, terrified. When she finally returned home, she discovered something even worse. Her bed sheets smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. Carol didn't smoke. Police later connected her case to a series of unsolved bedroom intrusions. In each one, the intruder left behind a taunting message on the walls, mirrors, or even scraps of paper. Victims described the feeling not of robbery, but of psychological invasion. Suspense built, the copycat. Decades later, in 1992, another case surfaced in Denver, Colorado, with chilling similarities. A man broke into a family's home while they were sleeping. The parents woke in the morning to find their kitchen table rearranged. In the center was a handwritten note. "Thanks for letting me watch." The family was horrified. Their children's rooms had been quietly entered during the night. The intruder didn't take anything, but he had left behind the knowledge that he'd been there, watching. What made this case worse was that the intruder came back. 2 weeks later, another note appeared, this time taped to the refrigerator. "You can't lock me out." If these stories already have your skin crawling, subscribe right now. I always bring you cases like these, dark, twisted, and almost forgotten. Story 9, The Voice on the Phone. Not all the messages were written. Some were spoken. In 1980, a mother in Los Angeles put her children to bed and went to sleep herself around midnight. At 3:14 a.m., the phone rang. Groggy, she picked up. On the other end was a man whispering, "I can see you." She hung up, thinking it was a prank. But moments later, she heard a creak in her hallway. When police arrived, they found her back door open and muddy footprints leading inside. The intruder was never caught. But over the next 6 months, at least 5 other families in the same area reported receiving middle-of-the-night phone calls from the same whispering voice. In some cases, the calls came minutes before victims discovered open windows or rearranged furniture. Detectives referred to the case as the Midnight Caller, and while he was never identified, many believe he was the same man behind several unsolved sleep murders in the area. Psychological twist: why messages? Criminal profilers suggest that intruders who leave messages aren't just committing crimes. They're performing. They want their victims to live in fear long after the event is over. It's a form of psychological dominance, proof that the crime wasn't random, that the victim was chosen, watched, and targeted. One profiler put it chillingly: for these offenders, the note is the real crime. The murder, the intrusion, it's just the canvas. The message is the art. By now, you've heard about footsteps outside doors, killers slipping through windows, entire towns losing sleep, and intruders leaving behind words designed to haunt forever. But there's one final case that ties all of this together, the ultimate nightmare. Because in Act 5, we're going to talk about the story of a killer who turned dreams into death sentences. The dream that killed. Nightmares are supposed to end when you wake up. But what if your nightmare kept going, bleeding into real life, following you out of your sleep and into the world? This last case isn't just about killers who entered bedrooms. It's about a story so haunting that even today, people debate whether it was a crime of flesh and blood, or something much darker. Story 10: The Dream Murder. In 1981, a refugee community in Los Angeles began experiencing something unexplainable. Dozens of young men, healthy, strong, in their 20s, were suddenly dying in their sleep. They would go to bed perfectly fine. Hours later, their families would hear screams from their rooms, only to find them thrashing in bed, gasping for breath, or worse, already gone. Autopsies showed no physical trauma. No poison. No disease. Just sudden, unexplained death. But what made the case terrifying was this: many of the men told their families, before dying, that they were having the same dream. A shadowy figure who came into their room at night, sat on their chest, and whispered, "If you fall asleep, you will not wake up." Within a few years, more than 100 young men were dead. Doctors called it sudden unexplained nocturnal death syndrome. But in the community, it became known by another name, the Night Terror. Suspense built, the uncanny connection. Investigators began to notice a chilling pattern. Every man who died had expressed fear of going to sleep in the days before their death. Some even tried to stay awake for days at a time. But eventually, exhaustion always won. And when it did, they never woke up. Some researchers speculated it was linked to stress and trauma. Others wondered if there was an environmental cause. But in the community itself, whispers spread that something was targeting them, something that came not through doors or windows, but through dreams. What made this case horrifying wasn't just the deaths. It was the uncertainty. Were they victims of a medical mystery, or of something far more sinister? Story 11: The Copycat Killer. Years later, in 1997, a man in Chicago was arrested after breaking into multiple apartments at night. His method was bizarre. He didn't immediately attack. Instead, he stood silently over his victims' beds until they woke up. When they screamed, he whispered, "Don't fall asleep." Then he would vanish into the night. Police caught him after he broke into a woman's home and left behind fingerprints on her nightstand. When questioned, he said something chilling. "I wasn't going to kill them. I just wanted them to know what it feels like to fear your dreams." Authorities called him the Dream Stalker. If you've made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person who loves the darkest, most disturbing stories. Subscribe right now so you never miss one, because the next story might be the one that keeps you up tonight. The final twist: dreams as traps. Psychologists who studied both the unexplained deaths and the dream stalker pointed out something disturbing: fear of sleep itself can become deadly. When the body is pushed to its limits, days without rest, the brain begins to hallucinate. Shadows at the edge of the bed. Whispers in the dark. A sense of presence. And in some cases, those hallucinations can trigger fatal heart attacks. Meaning the fear of sleep can actually kill. So the line between intruder and nightmare, between crime and folklore, becomes almost impossible to separate. Tonight, we've gone through killers who watched from outside doors, predators who crept through windows, intruders who left chilling messages, and entire communities terrorized into sleeplessness. But the most haunting part is this: the one place we all believe we're safest, our own bed, has always been the most vulnerable. So when you go to sleep tonight, ask yourself, will you wake up to the same room you closed your eyes in, or something else? If this story left you checking your locks, hit that subscribe button right now. I always bring you chilling, mysterious, and forgotten true crime stories, and you do not want to miss what's coming next.